All right, we're live. I love how it just kind of kicks off. It's always so good. Thanks for joining everybody here today. It's Friday. There's some chilled music playing in the background. It's very subtle. You probably turn up your volume if you want to hear it, but it just keeps me focused. I don't know about you, Andy, but I feel like when it's just like silent, all I have going on in the background, I have a dehumidifier in my basement here, and it like kicks on and off and on and off, and sometimes having like that consistent sound quality underneath is pretty nice.
No, it's great because I'm on a second floor office that's downtown and it's street facing. So I get, sirens and yelling and all that other stuff. So, yeah, I would much rather have something like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're tuning in today, thanks so much for jumping on. I think we already have 6 people in here. I mean, I'm one of them, so that probably we have 5.
Hey.
But whatever. But if you're tuning in today, you're going to hear about healthcare. We're going to talk all about. We're not going to talk about like high level healthcare. So if you're like a HIPAA nut or you're like a doctor or something, man, I don't. I'm not doing any malpractice stuff over here. This is really more about just some of the. I mean, we have. I guess we could start with. Just kind of what's going on in the space. It's Chance, right? Healthcare, United Healthcare.
Change.
It's Change. So
Yes.
Change Healthcare is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, right? And that's kind of the not sure how many people have been impacted by it or have dealt with it, but we kind of want to talk about broad picture what's going on there. We want to talk a little bit about the healthcare industry in general. Pulled some crazy stats that not super excited about. Honestly, I mean, it's exciting to talk about, but not necessarily the most exciting to talk to show. And then we're gonna get into the insurance implications, kind of what can we draw from that on that side. But before we get started, if you're here, say hi. I'm gonna open up the. It says we got 9 people in here. There's a lot for a live stream on a Friday afternoon. So if you're here, say hi. We'd love to hear from you. Love to know. Do you are you an MSP? Are you an insurance agent? What do you do? But either way, yeah, let's get started here. Andy, got anything you want to kick off with there, Andy? Before I get into the nerdiness of what happened.
No, other than just the fact that this thing has seemed to compound more and more over the last couple of weeks, it was obviously big news when it happened, but we started seeing through our LinkedIn network. I think Mercy Comar up in Ohio, saw her say that she had a couple claims related to it. There she is. Hey, Mercy. Yeah,
Hey.
what was it? We were just, your ears were burning, right? She said she had a couple claims there, and then I got a couple of calls from some MSPs locally and some friends. Had an old buddy that's a pharmacist, and we talked about it, and it's just kind of seemed to build, as we've gone. So definitely a hot button topic, which is why we have hotcakes, right?
Yeah, you know what's funny about Mercy jumping in there to say hello as you mentioned her name? There's a delay on the stream. Like it's like 10 seconds. So you said Mercy, she said hello, and just now she's realizing that we were talking about It's awesome.
Funny.
I love it. But anyway, yeah. So long story short, ransomware attack on United Healthcare Change. Now they are specifically like an RX subsidiary, right? So it's not United Healthcare conglomerate as a whole. It's a much. I mean, I'm not going to call it small. I mean, it's United Healthcare.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't know if small would be the moniker
we'll just stick
there.
with the term subsidiary, sister company, maybe you can call it something like that. But it's owned by United Healthcare, and I mean, they were ransomwared, right? So they faced a ransomware attack. $22 million ransom had to be paid, but the one of the big implications here is that it has led to prescription delays kind of across the country. And if you think of like, especially, I mean, Walgreens was reporting delays in being able to fulfill subscriptions. And then if you think of all the really small pharmacies out there, I mean, that probably don't have the resources that maybe
Yep.
something like a
Yep.
CVS or a Rite Aid has. There were some
Right.
serious delays in getting people their prescriptions, and that can be so. So that to me is one of those moments now where you're looking at this is not just affecting your small business, right? Oh, your business goes down. Let's say you're a I don't know. Maybe let's use McDonald's because that keeps coming up in live streams. Your McDonald's branch goes down and you can't give people fast food. It's like, oh well, this is inconvenient.
They
But
can
now
eat.
we're yeah,
They can get food.
they
Right.
can still get food elsewhere. But this is people trying to fill their prescriptions. Like their
Correct.
health needs are now
Right.
being so. So not only is the pharmacist unable to perform their work, but the people who rely on the pharmacist for their own well-being and health cannot access what they need. So this is one of those chain of events things where you see the cyber incident not just affecting the business, but also really affecting the people who rely on the business, not just for a product, but for survival.
Right.
And it can get really ugly. What are your thoughts there?
Yep. Yeah, no, and I mean that's as a guy who's got a background in that world, right? Like I was in pharmaceutical sales, so I dealt with prescriptions in pharmacies and clinics for half a decade there. You see how I was never part of a breach, but if folks can't get their meds, bad things happen, tempers flare, things like that,
You're
and
gonna have a bad time.
so. Yeah, for kind of in preparation for us going today, I've got two good friends that are still local mom and pop pharmacies, and to your point, I mean, there's really two things that are going on here that's causing the delay. Change is kind of the primary what's called switch for the pharmacy, where when they make a claim, they're the one that the prescription, the insurance filing goes through before it goes to the carrier.
Right.
Well, it's those guys and I'm trying to think of the Relay Health. That's the other one, right? So if you were on Change, it's not a good time, right? If you were on Relay, you're good, right? Like they're not having a breach, and you can still get those prescriptions filed. So what's happening now is because we're into 2.5, 3 weeks down, a lot of folks in that time period have decided to move over from Change to Relay, which is causing a bottleneck, right? And there's a lot of people onboarding with Relay. And then additionally, too, because Change does provide more than just those services. I talked to a buddy today that said that in all, they provide over 100 services to dental offices, pharmacies, and hospitals across the country. One of the other main things on the prescription side is that they process, if you've ever seen like a copay card, this was a big deal when I was in pharma, right? Like branded medications. Some people need a branded version. They can't get, their generic pharmaceuticals. Change processes those copay cards that makes a $400, prescription be $20 or $30, right?
Yep.
So
Like
they
the
process
discount
those.
prescriptions.
That's right.
Yeah.
So not only do we have a lack of an ability to make claims, right, and to get prescriptions processed, we also have an inability to process those savings cards. So there are people right now that are, used to paying $5, $20, $30 for prescriptions that can't get that card processed, that now are looking at, there's, I know you've probably seen this, but when I was in the diabetic world, there are diabetic combination medications that are, Ozempic's a huge GLP-1. It's not a combo, but $1,000, $1,100 a month, that some people were probably used to paying $20, $30, $40 for. So it does cause a major log jam. One of the guys that I talked to mentioned specifically TRICARE, which is the group that our military uses, to fill prescriptions, and how they've had a major disruption. So, think about the implications. I know we're talking about a specific disease state, but think about active members of our military not being able to fill their diabetic medications and control their blood sugar. Pretty impactful stuff.
Yeah, it's not good. It's literally like we were saying before. It's literally, I'm not gonna say life and death situations in all cases, but it's people who who rely on medication for their well-being and health. And this is not. Here's the challenge, right? It's not the fault of the pharmacies. And that's granted, I don't know exactly how to trace this back to where it started. I don't think I read that far, because that part doesn't really concern me all that much, because I'm not a person who's going to blame, breach blame people or breach shame. But rather, you look at all these pharmacies, and now, let's say I walked into a pharmacy, right? And I went to fulfill a prescription and the pharmacist wasn't aware of the incident, right? They didn't know that it was down. And all of a sudden they take my insurance card and they get, they get a loading screen that won't do anything. Like, what are they being presented with? And then they have to
Right.
turn around and tell the customer, oh, we can't fulfill your prescription right now. Like, that's a
Right.
problem.
Sure.
And that, I mean, now you multiply that all across the country and people who are dealing with this kind of stuff, and you start to run into this reality. You start to run into this reality of what's going on, where people are unable to fulfill prescriptions across the country, and now there's a lot of confusion. People are worried, they're anxious, they're nervous. This is a big deal, but something I want to kind of share here, because there's a couple of pieces to this. Now, not only when you have a ransomware attack, it's like your system's down, so you have this piece where it's like, okay, you can't fulfill the prescriptions, but also tons of data on the network. I mean, when you think of, if you're someone who manages prescriptions, you have that information, you feed that. Like, if you get ransomware and now the threat actors have access to all your stuff. I mean, it's not just oh, people can't fulfill their prescriptions. People's actual prescription data is at risk now too. And this really starts to escalate. It starts to blow up. Makes me think of like HIPAA, for example, having these very specific cybersecurity measures in place that they're saying you have to fill, and people are just like, I mean, not to throw anyone under the bus, but how many smaller medical businesses want to take the time to say, hey, we want to invest in all this cybersecurity because we totally can. Like, it's not necessarily the priority. I made this meme real quick before we started this, because honestly, it's how I think a lot of people feel.
Sure.
But then you see something like this incident where, so it's like HIPAA security privacy guidelines. I do not have the time to deal with this. Toss it in the fire, right? When in reality, you see something like this where not only are people unable to fulfill their prescriptions. I don't want my face there. People are unable to fulfill their prescriptions, but they're also potentially having their data leaked. Like, this is bad. This reminds me back of back in 2022 when that medical portal was not properly. Honestly, it wasn't just properly notifying. They were not supposed to be tracking metapixels, and people started to see their prescription data as advertisements on Facebook. Like, this is the kind of thing where it's like, oh, my data is very much just there, and if someone gets access to it who shouldn't, now that's a privacy leak, right? So I'm feeling that kind of too. Anything to add there before?
Yeah. No, I mean, and people just, I mean, one of the constant themes throughout today, I think, is going to be that we as the general public don't have really any idea what the tentacles of a breach can look like, right, as they play out. And I mean, to your point about that PHI, that personal health information, I've sat in boardrooms with, very, very high level ranking officials for mental health facilities that are like, cyber insurance, why do we need, we got an internal IT, why would we need you guys, and completely and totally ignorant to the fact that there have been case studies worldwide where not only through the acquisition of that information has the entity been ransomed, right? But now they're pulling individuals' chart notes and going into those individuals and saying, hey, if you don't pay us, 10 grand or 20 grand, we're going to release your entire mental history or medical history, that includes schizophrenia, bipolar, suicidality. We're going to release that to your employer, So, I mean, the far reaching, the tentacles of this thing go way farther than most people consider when you start getting into the healthcare system.
Yeah. I mean, definitely some spear phishing opportunities there for cyber criminals too, not just massive phishing attacks. Now, here's the thing though, because when you have an attack of this size, or you have an attack that affects this many people, it becomes the mainstream news for a while. It's kind of like MGM casinos last summer. We just got back from a conference that was at MGM, right? I mean, here's the thing: United Healthcare, MGM, these businesses and corporations are so massive that they're going to navigate this breach fine. And at the end of the day, I think they're going to no one's going to look at United Healthcare in 6 months and be like, oh man. I mean, there may be a couple of people who don't love the fact that they couldn't get their prescription data, but at the end of the day, like, United Healthcare is one of the mega insurance providers for most businesses, right? So whether you want to have it or not, it would be up to the business owner to go find something else, right? And that's where the challenge really starts to build. Now, but here's the other piece, right? So you have these massive companies that undergo data incidents, and we hear about them. They're on the news. We talk about this a lot, and I'm sure if Mercy's on here, any other insurance agents who are on here have probably had the conversation with clients where they say, people aren't going after me. I'm too small. I'm not a target. Blah blah blah. Like that's a classic response here. I'm gonna just share. I found this article from HIPAA Journal, and it came out this year. So it's tracking data all the way through 2023. So it came out recently. So I'm gonna share this because I think this is honestly super helpful for us to kind of pour through a little bit. I don't know how easy it is to see all this. So, but it's not just the number of data breaches that are increasing as the breaches are becoming more severe. 2021 was a bad year for data breaches with 45.9 million records breached. 2022 was worse with 51.9 million records breached, but 2023 smashed all previous records with an astonishing 133 million records exposed, stolen, or otherwise impermissibly disclosed. And this is in the medical industry. So 133 million, but the stat doesn't just end there. I mean, this was my stat, right? The one that really flipped me over off my chair is in 2023, an average of 1.99 healthcare data breaches of 500 or more records. So two healthcare data breaches of 500 or more records were reported each day. And on average, 364,571 healthcare records were breached every day. So on average, in 2023, every day they saw two incidents where at least 500 records were breached. I mean, this is a problem. This is the part that this should scare people who work in the medical field, who have their small businesses, who dentist offices and pediatrician offices and like these smaller offices who may or may not be taking cybersecurity seriously because, again, I'm small, I'm a tiny business, I operate out of my house, whatever. When in reality, I mean, we're seeing this is blowing up. I mean, if you can, again, these charts are pretty small, so I'm sorry if it's too tiny to read, but look at this rise in incidents. And this is so in 2023 saw 725 725 healthcare breaches reported. So again, that 1.99 per day kind of thing. 2024 is only 61, but guess what? We're only in March, and I'm pretty sure this was released in January. So it's still not a good number. 61 in January really holds up that 2 per day kind of thing. So this is what I'm getting. And then if you look at the individuals affected, I mean, we saw a drop. Something happened in 2015 that led to a drop. Maybe cybersecurity got serious for a little bit, or HIPAA got serious or cracked down. But then this slow increase. 2020, we saw that little rest, which I don't know why. But look at 2023 compared to 2022. I mean, more than double. You went from less than 60 million records lost to 130 million. Like, this is of individuals affected. This isn't records. These are individual. 130 million people affected by leaked medical records. Now, this is the part where you look at it and you go, what the heck is going on? I mean, why are so many? And I guess from the insurance standpoint, I love sharing this stuff because I'm a charts guy and I'm a numbers guy. I was a math major. But at the end of the day, let's take this to a practical level here. I am not surprised as to why healthcare, medical, that industry is one of the most frustrating to insure when it comes to cyber. When you look at the records, when you look at the data, that's what carriers do, right? Carriers are looking at past data, they're looking at past claims, and they're saying, hold on a minute. Like, last year, there was more than double the amount of people affected by lost records. And you think you want your insurance premium to stay the same? I don't know. So that's kind of what I look at and get a little nervous there. So there's my nerdy chart time. I'm not going to go through all these charts, but what I will do is, actually, I'll do it right now. I'll post a link to this article in the chat for this, just so people can access it. But yeah. Any thoughts there, Andy? Before I get into like the before we can get into the insurance side? I can let you nerd out now.
No, there's just it's a tangled web. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. When you think about healthcare as a whole, number one, they hold the kind of the golden nugget of information of what a cyber criminal wants. Combination of name, date of birth, payment information, right? Health information. That the PHI is the most valuable thing. So number one is that they have the most sought after material, right? Two, they've got it in droves, right? Like some facilities have got, going back multiple years on thousands of patients, right? So it's all sitting there on one server. Sometimes very lax, ideas around cybersecurity. And I mean, as a guy, listen, if there's any doctors on the call, I'm going to go ahead and apologize up front. Met some phenomenal, very humble doctors, right? As a whole, fairly arrogant dudes, right? Like they think that they've got it licked and you plot, right? So anyway, that's there's some issues there. There's a lot of things that are making healthcare be kind of in the crosshairs between what they have and then also to turnover, right? I mean, like think about training, security awareness training for people to make sure that they're health turnover with nurses and things like that. It's just, I mean, it's a tough business to protect.
Yeah, Andy, you're crackling. Your mic's crackling a little bit. I'm not 100% sure why. You sound like you're cutting in and out. I don't know if everyone else is dealing with that. Maybe I'm just hearing it. If I'm just hearing it, great. But either way, we were able to understand what you were saying. I just want to make sure your quality's good. But either way, so let's I'm gonna stop sharing this. Let's go to the actual implications here from the insurance perspective, right? I mean, we don't need to drag this out too long, but I think it's important that we understand, like, there are specific pieces across the board here when it comes to how insurance could kick in, and I think there's certain coverages you brought up, Andy, that I think would be important. You mind diving into some of those a little bit?
Yeah, is the mic any better? Is that, or am I still?
The mic is better, but your audio's delayed now. So like you're talking, it's like an old Godzilla movie. We're dubbed right now. But man. What it is, I guess.
So anyway, yeah, no, talking specifically about Change Healthcare and how it deals with, or how it relates to like what's going on currently, right, with those pharmacies. That probably the most unknown coverage, one of the most unknown, is dependent network interruption or dependent business interruption. And I mean, I'll read it right here from our our coverage insight that we send out. It's a company's losses and rectification costs from a loss sustained in connection with cloud computing interruptions. And an example of that would be third-party remote workspace platform that a company relies on has an outage, and this results in interruption and financial loss to the company. So, Change Healthcare goes down. Clinic doesn't have a breach. Pharmacy doesn't have a breach, but they depend on Change Healthcare to contract business, make money, and all of a sudden that's delayed, right? And we have no idea of when those monies are going to come in and when those claims are going to be processed, right? So when I was talking with Warren Balcom's a good friend of mine, he does compliance for an MSP partner of ours, and we were talking about some of the questions that he's had around this. He's spoken to some doctors that are looking at, okay, do we pay the rent this month or do we make payroll this month, right? Because we don't have the cash flow that we normally do. Spoke with another clinic owner. He was a dentist, and he told me, he's like, man, when I came through dentist school, they told me that I need to put aside 2 months worth of operating budget, right, to just kind of set that aside, and he did that, right? So he's fine right now, and he described this Change Healthcare breach as a total cluster, right? But he's doing fine because he had that 2 months of money sitting aside, right? And he said, we'll get it. They'll get back up and running. It'll push through. It may be a month from now, it may be 2 months from now, but I'm okay. and I asked him, I said, but what if it had been like a 7 or 8 week breach? He was like, that would have gotten really interesting, right? So having insurance and being able to file that dependent network interruption or that dependent business income, that's a key coverage for something like this that you're not going to find on a business owner's policy add-on or on a cyber warranty, right? Like those nuanced coverages are relegated specifically to comprehensive cyber insurance.
Yeah, and that's I think the kind of coverages that people aren't typically thinking about, right? I mean,
Correct.
we've talked about this many times that usually when an incident happens, what people are immediately thinking is, my business isn't operating, I got to get it running again, and they're not thinking of how other people might be affected. They're not thinking about how their reputation might be affected down the road. They're not thinking about all that kind of stuff. So you run into these issues where there's all this pressure on the security provider to get things moving again. If the security provider did that, they'd be tampering with a crime scene, honestly, and you wouldn't be able to figure those things out. So now your business is down for whatever the average is nowadays. I feel like that number just keeps going up.
Right.
14, 16, 20 days, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
That's 2 weeks you can't operate. 2 to 3 weeks you can't operate as a business, and not being able to do that is going to affect you. It's going to affect your business. It's going to affect others who rely on your business. And if you don't have the full gamut of what a cyber insurance policy can cover you for, you're going to miss out on a lot of those key and important coverages because you're not really thinking about them. And I don't blame people. I don't blame a small doctor's office for not having a credit monitoring and notification service on retainer. I mean, it's just not things that small doctors' offices spend their time doing. So that's kind of where I look at incidents like this, and it's so easy. And obviously we did, like, for the first 15 minutes of this, it's so easy to focus in on the massive fact that, United Healthcare, this is massive change. This is massive. Like, everybody, but then when you scope it down, you say, wait a minute, like, let's talk about how, and you just did this perfectly, Andy. Let's talk about how a small dentist office handles this. How do they navigate this situation? How does a small pediatrician who works out of their home or out of a house they bought navigate this incident? We're not talking about hospitals. We're not talking about, massive healthcare facilities. We're talking about people who own their business and they operate it and are being affected by this massive outage. So, that's my 2 cents there. Anything else to add insurance wise?
First of all, shout out to Mercy. I mean, she's here, but she was the one in regards to, obviously we knew what dependent network interruption, dependent business income was, but as it's related to this claim, Mercy's post about, her having a pharmacy that, was having a dependent network interruption claim. That was when the light bulb kind of went off for me as it relates to change. Right. And then as I started doing some digging here in Northeast Arkansas, what I came across is like every single person that I spoke to, I've got a lot of friends in healthcare, right? I've got clinic owners, pharmacy owners, doctors. It affects everybody differently, right? Some of them hit the lottery and they don't deal with change. They deal with the other one, right? So they don't have a whole lot of issues, right? One guy had a nest egg that luckily his professor in dental school told him and he listened. Other people are really struggling. They're trying to figure out if they're going to be able to make payroll this month or not, and whether or not they're going to lose employees, right? So the overall arcing thing, man, is that, as it relates to insurance is everybody thinks about the loss as it would relate to them, right? Like if my network got hit, if I had to pay a ransom, right? Unfortunately, there's this narrative in cyber insurance, particularly in the South where I live. It's like, y'all probably heard me say this. We'd never negotiate with terrorists and I'd never pay a ransom. So I don't need cyber insurance. Like that's a very common thought track, right? Or thought path. And the reality of it is like, here we sit and there are multiple businesses that did nothing wrong. The breach was not on them. They didn't click on a phishing link. They didn't wire money, right? They didn't have MFA fatigue. All the things that can lead to a breach. It wasn't on them. It was on a third party. But here they are having to claim their insurance, or I shouldn't say have to. They're able to claim their insurance and keep their business afloat, right? Yep. So that's the big deal. Is that if anybody that's listening or anybody that deals with people that have this idea of, man, we're tight like Fort Knox, or we would never pay a ransom, therefore we don't need insurance for this. Man, sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about your vendor. And then now And this is where we kind of get off into the weeds. And what Warren and I were talking about this morning is like, now we start talking about vendor management policies, exchanging of insurance. If I'll show you mine, if you show me yours, you've got it, I've got it, we're doing business together. I mean, now we start getting really into the weeds of like, what do my third party relationships look like? Who are my top 5 vendors? Who am I financially dependent on? And how are they protecting their network? And what type of insurance do they have? Right. It can get pretty hairy there pretty quick.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And it gets so complicated though. You talk about vendor management, you talk about insurance policies and comparing them and all that kind of stuff. You get to the end. But when it comes to an actual incident like this, it doesn't matter if you have an insurance policy or not. At the end of the day, it's going to take time to recover. Right. And I think that's if you have an insurance policy, the pain of recovery is not so bad, right? And that's the beauty of it.
Maybe fewer sleepless nights, but they're still nervous, right?
There's still lag, and it's like, right. This just shows. I mean, if I were to put a bow on this, it just shows that. And Mercy, I mean, we keep bringing you up, but I mean, I know you had a couple of posts throughout the course of like when this change incident first happened and things played out. You were dealing with clients who wrestled through this, and it's not easy. I mean, it was not an easy thing to navigate, and there was a lot of pain to it. So it's this kind of thing where you have you're going to have clients who struggle through an incident. You want to be there to help them, but those clients are also going to be dealing with other vendors and whatnot who are going to be hit hard. And it's just to be able to navigate those incidents together is really important. I don't know. It's just it's crazy. It's not something you can just turn it off and back on again. That's kind of part of my thought there. But anyway. Yeah, I mean, this we just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about this because I do think it's important. It always does kind of, I don't want to say irk me but it does irk me a little bit when we focus too heavily on the really big names that get hit by an incident. But the unique reality of this particular incident is that because Change Healthcare suffered an incident, you have a lot of people affected by it. It's not like and like businesses affected by it, not just lost records, which already in and of itself is bad, but on top of that, you have businesses that cannot operate, right? So you see this long chain of events, very different from like MGM Casino when they got hit. It's like, okay, your records got leaked, but I'm just because you can't gamble today doesn't mean your business is going out of business, Yeah. So we're seeing some real ramifications of how an incident can really work down the chain. And I think it's just really important for us to observe and understand that. And it just shows why cybersecurity is so important. Getting those things in place, doing best practices. It doesn't guarantee you're not going to get hit, but the more you can do to protect your business, the less you're going to deal with stuff like this. And that's I think a good walkaway there.
Yep. And you talk about like the macro to micro look, and if you look at this, I mean, Change is obviously at the macro level, but I spent some time talking with a local mom and pops or a pharmacist today, one of my good buddies, Jet Jones, and I asked him, he was with Relay Other Switch platform, right?
Sure.
And I asked him, I said, I'm interested from an insurance standpoint. I said, had you change and you had to move over to Relay, would you have, after they got everything back in order and they were up and running and you got the email that said, hey, we're good, come back, would you have gone back? And he was like, no chance, 0% chance. He was like, it's such a heavy lift to get everything moved over. Relay would have just had more. So let's take that idea and let's apply that down to the micro level of the mom and pop pharmacy or the retail shop or whatever it may be, right? Yep. If I have a dentist or whoever and he goes out and I can't see him and I've got to go to another dentist to get a tooth fixed or whatever, pretty good chance that other dentist moving forward or that other pharmacy moving forward, especially if they do a good job, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that type of reputational harm, number one, that's something that I don't feel like people consider, right? Like if I am down or if I can't service my client, what is my reputational bleed? And we've got really good statistics that show that bleed can be, 4 to 6%, which is not insignificant, right? Over the course of 6 months to a year, and then also too, reputational harm is covered by comprehensive cyber insurance, right? Like that's another reason that people don't think about that you should buy comprehensive cyber insurance.
That's it.
That like the macro to micro macro. I mean, I think about the reputational harm, how it applies to this breach, but then also how that would work out at, in a town of 30,000 people.
Yep. No, that's good. Well, friends, I think it's really important takeaway here. Cyber insurance covers a lot more than just the ransomware attack. And when we look at all those pieces, and we're going to keep sharing about this kind of stuff, all these different coverages that exist out there. But for now, I mean, just that takeaway that in the event of an incident, there are going to be other vendors, other companies, other clients who are affected by things like this. So it's one of the reasons why we always strongly encourage our MSP partners to make sure that their clients are carrying cyber insurance. And it's why we always encourage our agent partners to really get up to speed on cyber insurance, because it's not just this thing that's going away. And it also consistently is changing in terms of how the scope of coverage works. We did that whole episode on AI two weeks ago. Who knows where things are going? So there's going to be changes, endorsements, all that kind of stuff's coming. For now, have a great weekend. Andy, any other things you want to wrap up with here before we go?
No, man, it's just
not to put you on the spot.
No, it's all good. I've enjoyed talking about it. I hadn't been able to get back into those farmer routes. I hadn't even thought about an A1C level, or when
you say A1, I just think steak sauce. So
no, man, you said something earlier, and it kind of made me diabetic brain when we were talking about GLP-1s and basal insulin and stuff. So it was fun.
Oh yeah,
to think about that stuff again.
No, that's awesome.
Kelly Register. Kelly's not listening. There's no reason she would be. She is on LinkedIn. Kelly, if you ever cruise past my page and see this, you're my favorite partner I had. She was phenomenal.
That's awesome. Hey, good stuff. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll be back here same time next week talking about we don't even know yet. So for now, we will talk to you soon. Enjoy. Thanks so much for your time, and I have to figure out how to stop this stream. So we'll talk to you later.